AskReddit by Reddit Universe. What was your paranormal experience? I was visiting family and staying in a hotel with my boyfriend, husband now. The first night that we went to bed and I woke up in the middle of the night facing the window. I noticed there was a dark shadow in the corner of the room that looked human shaped. After staring a while I realized it must have been a floor lamp since that corner was kind of bare and that's the logical choice. I rolled over and went back to bed. The following morning I remembered this and turned to look into the corner where the lamp was and there isn't a floor lamp there. The corner is bare. I mentioned it to my boyfriend and he went white. He told me that he woke up in the middle of the night because he felt like he was being watched and had to get up out of bed to go to the bathroom. I vaguely remember him getting up to try and shake the feeling. It still sticks with me in dark rooms. I had a friend who was very sick at the hospital this past spring. Not COVID, but sepsis from an operation on his back. I went to bed, and in that in-between stage where you're not awake and not quite asleep, I could sense him standing by the side of my bed. We said a few words to each other, and then he hugged me. When I woke up the next morning, I found out that he'd passed not long after I'd gone to bed. Many people would say it was just a dream, but I know better in my heart. I felt that he was actually there, and I felt the hug. He was one of the most caring and inspiring people that I'd known, and it was just like him to say goodbye to the people who loved him. Not mine, but one I think of a lot. I was at work one night and my mom was visiting my newborn son and wife. I get home and my mom tells me she heard my dad talking to my son. My dad died 8 years prior, but she swears up and down it was his voice. My wife heard it too but never met my dad, so she couldn't say much about it, just that it was a man's voice. Then it happened again when my daughter was born. I really want to believe my dad is watching the kids grow up, but I'll never know. I'll add my own in here. I once was laying in my bed with my dog at the foot of it. I was on the cusp of sleep when suddenly my dog's pop her head up and locks onto something in the middle of my room. Her head then slowly turns and follows something I can't see. Her head stops again and my backpack gets knocked over, after having been in the same spot for hours. Then all of a sudden a loud bang on my bedroom window. I was on the second floor of the house. I ran out of that room so quick without daring to look at that window. A couple of years ago I had a dream reliving one of my childhood experiences where I was playing with my cousin, and at the end of the dream when he was getting ready to go home, I said goodbye to him and for some reason it felt different that time. A couple of days later he ended up passing away due to sudden death syndrome, basically a heart attack, but he was 25 so it was very unusual. 3 years later to this day, every 2-3 weeks, I'm having very vivid dreams where I'm talking with him and having full conversations. My friend says it's my cousin reaching out to me, and while I don't believe that, I can't otherwise explain it rationally. Something I forgot to mention is he was born the same month and year as me, just 8 days apart, and so we'd been close friends since we were young kids. IDK if this is paranormal, but it's definitely a bit freaky. So it was just a normal night. I go to bed. I'm still a youngish kid and I end up having a dream. So it was my uncle who came to me in this dream and his face was caved in and he had blood all over him. His arms and legs were broken. All this gory stuff. Anyway, I have this dream and he says to me, take care of your mother. So this is my mum's older brother. Anyway, mum comes and wakes me up in the middle of this dream and she's crying and upset, so I get out of bed and comfort her. She tells me she got a call from the hospital saying that my uncle had died in a motorbike accident moments earlier. Anyway, for about a week after that mum was quite upset, and then maybe 10 or so days later mum tells me she had a dream that my uncle visited her and apologized to her and then drifted away. Anyway, I believe it's years later and it's his death day. Mum lights a candle to celebrate and whatnot, and I saw my uncle sitting on the couch watching over my mum. I didn't know what I was seeing, but it just disappeared into thin air. It was almost like I had a sixth sense. The only paranormal thing that have happened to me, and I really don't know how it was possible, happened at my aunt's place when I was a kid. Every once in a while, we went to her house and stayed the night, and I always ended up sleeping on the couch sofa. Well, this was an old house with a room full of creepy dolls and the likes, but with those nothing weird happened. Although my cousins would say that the dolls moved around. It had 2 floors with a stair in the middle that ended right where I would usually sleep. So every time The moment everyone was asleep and not other sound was heard, I would invariably hear a marble being dropped from the stairs until it rolled down the floor, and this would repeat 5-6 times every night. No one plays with marbles. Everybody was asleep, so to this day I can't think of a reason for that to happen. I was hanging out on a friend's back porch in a suburban neighborhood with a few people, maybe 3 other people. It was about dusk. This was during high school, so before 2005. The back porch faced out over a small creek valley of open space. A blue-green ball of light came zooming in over the open space from the left and stopped about 100 feet away, maybe 40 feet off the ground. It was maybe the size of a softball. Then it zoomed over to about 15 feet away and 15 feet up in the air and stopped for about 2 breaths. Then it shot straight up into the sky and was gone in less than a second. The way it moved was weird too. It didn't hover or drift at all, it just went from one point in space to another and then stopped. Not like it vanished and reappeared. I mean, it moved so fast it kind of looked like that. But there was not slowing down or speeding up, it just went. All 4 of us saw it. We talked about it a little bit, not much. Just kind of sat with the realization we'd been inspected by aliens. Weird, you posted this today. I am a real estate broker and flip houses. We buy old beat up houses. Some of them are the worst of the worst, as you could imagine. Anyway, we bought one and went to see it today. It had been vacant for 10 years and when we went inside there was a blood stain on the floor. Come to find out that somebody killed themselves in that house 10 years ago. Pretty creepy. My partner and I were taking walkthrough videos to share with our contractors and get rehab estimates. Both of us independently took videos, and both of our phones shut off when we panned over the area with the blood stain where the man died. This is going to be a weird refurb. So me and my buddy are 14ish. We are sitting in his living room playing Pokemon and watching TV when out of the blue his sister, who was 15, comes running in the room crying like a 3-year-old who dropped her ice cream cone. After a short time she calms down enough to get us to follow us in her room. She was in her AP flute class and had to record herself playing some music. She had left the record button playing, and in that blank space she had recorded a clear as day young female screaming. Now this was not a ghost story's random bit of sound. This was obviously a young female screaming. He had a big fenced yard and next to her room was the garage. There was no way someone outside of the house could have screamed and been recorded that clear. His sister did no sleep in that room for 6 months. She deleted that recording that night to our disappointment. Well, I'm not sure if it is really paranormal, but I have a weird instinct. For example, when I was a teen I missed my job 3 times just because I couldn't force myself to go. Every time there was a shooting, either at my job or on the route I would have taken to get there. Another day, out of the blue I decided at the last minute to spend the night at my aunt's place for the first time, so I informed the people I used to carpool with every day and get out of the car. Important information: I get car sick, so my place is always back seat, passenger side. Well, when I meet my friends the next day, they tell me they were in a pretty bad accident but nobody is hurt. A car hit them while in the highway and the back of the car, passenger side, was wrecked. Have I been there? That would be the end of my story. And the last big incident was when I decided I didn't want to go on a boating day with my friends. No matter how much they insisted, or how much I usually enjoy those, I just didn't want to go. Well, the girl they invited to fill my spot hurt herself on a loose nail, ripped her leg open and had to go under 4 surgeries to reconstruct the flesh on her leg. Now, I really don't want to go somewhere or do something. Trust me, I don't. I'm a pilot. One time I was flying and I saw this bright orange glowing thing hovering over the trees. It was kind of bouncing around like if you had a ball on an elastic string and you just bounced it around and whatnot. Anyways, since my course would have brought me near it, I asked air traffic control if they saw anything on their radar, which they said no. They asked me what I saw, so I described it and they said they weren't showing anything and were not aware of any military activity. The thing shot straight up and disappeared. So I told them it was gone. They asked me if I wanted to file a UFO report, which I said heck no, it's probably a weather balloon. Then I continued on my way. I know it wasn't a balloon, but I don't want the FAA questioning my sanity. What freaks me out is that we know very little about the ocean, but relative to us, the ocean is finite. What is behind the blue sky we see is infinite, and we know nothing about it. I've told this one before, but it's worth a retelling. One summer while I was in college, I was acting as RA for a small 2-story, 15-room dorm that was housing a couple of students for the summer. One evening, the three of us were sitting in the first floor lounge watching a movie when we heard a female voice very clearly call my name from upstairs, twice. All three of us heard it, and we went to look together, because we were all scared out of our skulls and none of us wanted to be alone until we were sure the building was empty. It was a co-ed dorm, so a woman's voice wasn't completely impossible, but all three of us in residence at the time were male. None of us had guests, and the other 12 rooms were completely empty. No people, no electronics, emptied out for the summer. We confirmed that our stereos and personal TVs were off, computers were off, and so on. It never happened again, but we all heard it, and we couldn't explain it. Oh, I have a few. I'll go with this one though. I went to the movies with my pals in HS and carpooled with a few to get there. I drove. The film, The Evil Dead, movie ended. They were all going to get some food but I had to get home. The guys I drove were gonna go home with some of the others. It was getting late so I took the back roads that I knew I could speed on. I get onto X road that's like 6 miles long, and someone had his brights on. I flash him a few times, still on. It's taking a while to get past this guy. Normally it's 10-15 seconds of being blind, tops, but this time it was nearly 45 seconds to a minute before I get close. I slowed down to see what was the matter, and the car was idling down the shoulder of the road. All 4 doors open, dome lights on, nobody inside. Nobody was anywhere. If the movie I saw was a Disney flick I'd have stopped to see what was wrong and if anybody needed help or an ambulance called. But in this situation I opted to floor it and get the hell out of there. Not exactly paranormal but definitely not normal either. My sister had a horse doll that moved around on its own. Needless to say, we were both freaked out. No way someone was moving it, because nobody was around to move it at 4 AM when I decided to fact check her theory. Due to high demand, I figured I'd elaborate a little further. My memory is fuzzy because this all happened over a decade ago. Anyway, here's those extra details. To fact check whether or not my sister was telling the truth, I went around the house at night looking for the horse doll. I found it in her room. I went back to my room, tried to get back to sleep, and decided to double check. Went to her room and it was gone. I didn't hear any footsteps or sounds of movement so I doubt anyone was moving it. Like the curious kid I was, I went around the house looking for it. I found it in the living room. I ran straight back to my room and didn't sleep the rest of the night. My husband and I stayed at a super old hotel in Santa Fe, NM. At the time I did not really believe in paranormal things, ghosts, mainly because nothing had ever happened to me. The old room we were staying in had this decorative wooden chair that had a slanted seat. I took note of the slant, because I wound up putting my computer bag on this chair and felt comfortable doing so. I'm super careful with my electronics, and the slanted seat made it so my bag slid all the way back into the back of the chair so it couldn't fall. I also hung a nice new dress on the back of the chair. We went out for sightseeing and when we came back, my dress was on the floor near the chair. I wondered if housekeeping had touched it, even though we had do not disturb on our door all day and the room had not been serviced. Oh well, we ordered in some dinner and went to bed. My husband and I were laying in bed in the dark talking, almost falling asleep, when suddenly we hear a super loud slam. It was so loud, we shot awake and turned on the light. There on the other side of the room, a good 10 or 15 feet from the chair, was my computer bag. It was like someone had lifted it and threw it down. There's no way it just fell off the chair that far away, and the chair seat was slanted. It would be hard for anything to just fall off it, and it was a slam to the ground. I was so terrified, but my husband just shrugged like, I guess this place is haunted like a lot of places in Santa Fe. Guess the ghost doesn't like stuff on its chair. I demanded we sleep with the light on. I didn't even have the courage to check if my computer was okay until the next day. Me and some of my siblings were playing Xbox and we all had a pain on our arm at the exact same time. We all looked down and saw a cut there. We all noticed it was in the exact same place for all of us. TL. DR, my creepy dreams saved my life. I was a very placid, Dependable kid. I went to bed early and slept the entire night. No muss no fuss. The only time my mom can ever remember me crawling into bed with her is this one July. Apparently, a little after 1, night after night, I would get up, go downstairs, close all the doors, and crawl into her bed, saying the hot man made me do it. I remember this, but only very vaguely. I had to close the doors. Had to. The hot man, a black shape that burned when I went near it, would stand on my kitchen counters and scream until I had all the doors shut downstairs. After 2 weeks, at 1 in the morning, my mom wakes up to smoke. My kitchen was on fire. She got me out, called 911, and here's the freaky bit. The doors in my house were fireproof. The faulty wiring went up in minutes, and if the doors had been open, I would have died. We still live in the same house. I still won't go into that damn kitchen on my own. I used to live in Cambodia. While I was there, I saw a silhouette of a man, but made of smoke. I got scared, and bought a machete, brought the machete home with me, to the US, moved, to somewhere else in the US, and put almost everything I owned into a barn during the move. The barn, and all of its contents burned. I recovered the blade of the machete from the burned barn, and put it in a toolbox which I kept in my room. I am 100% sure I shut and latched the lid on the toolbox. I woke up that night to the sound of the toolbox's lid slamming shut. I was asleep and experiencing sleep paralysis, so dreaming, hallucinating. A boy at the end of the bed was taunting me with poking my foot. He hadn't quite touched my foot yet but was going to. It carried on for a while. I couldn't move, then he hit my foot, and at that exact moment my partner kicked me in the foot in her sleep. I've never been able to figure out how my hallucinating matched up with a real life real-time moment. I consider it to be paranormal. Pretty sure it was just coincidence, but there was one time me and my buddy were walking home from school. We decided to get some snacks at the convenience store nearby, and then took the shortcut we'd take after getting snacks. There was a kid we saw from the nearby elementary school. He had a red shirt with black sleeves, black shorts and a Ninja Turtles backpack. One of us mentioned that it was way too early for the elementary school to have released the students for the day, and that's why I remember that well. So after another 5-10 minutes go by, we see the same kid. There's no way this was possible, as the way he was walking would have led the kid back to the way we came from. There were no other streets that would have led him to be ahead of us again. We were kind of weirded out by that. Not much else really happened until we looked at the time and realized only 20 minutes or so had passed in what felt like almost 2 hours. We really didn't understand why that felt so long because we had taken the shortcut a couple times before. I was on a road trip with my family and our small dog. It was cool outside, so we decided to leave our dog in the vehicle and eat at a nearby restaurant. I was sitting in the restaurant for about 15 minutes when I was hit by a feeling that something was wrong with our dog. I was sure of it, so I told my wife that I had to go check on the dog, and I walked back to our car. It turned out that she had wandered into the back of our vehicle and stepped on my daughter's fishing rod, embedding an entire fishing hook in her leg. I had to take her to a local vet for emergency surgery. IDK if this is paranormal, but I find it strange. I'm going to preface this by saying I don't believe in ghosts at all, but one night a couple months ago, I was washing a dish in my sink when suddenly 2 wrinkled hands with long nails grabbed my ankles and yanked backwards, hard. I dropped the dish and cried out in surprise, but the hands weren't there when I turned around. It happened at an angle that was impossible unless the person was laying on their stomach behind me. No markings were left on my ankles, but I felt it for sure. So I was walking downstairs one morning and I stopped after 2-3 steps when I heard the sound of a cabinet opening and closing. I looked at the kitchen and saw a cabinet opening and closing, and the previous night I stayed up late with one of my cousin and her friend, and I swear to God, while we were seeing what would happen if we turned off the lights and just sat there, I heard something call out my name, and when I went to bed that night, I had a dream where there was just writing all over the walls saying watch out. What spooks me out more is that the day after the cabinet incident, my drug addict mother was found overdosed on the bathroom with needles around her. I always thought that there was some sort of being trying to warn me of what's to come. I've told this story a few times, and usually it gets a bit rambly because of the level of second guessing I've done about it over my life. One morning, when I was quite young, I woke up at around 3 AM, absolutely wide awake and alert. The house was silent and dark as it always was as that late, until a few moments later when I heard heavy footsteps coming slowly up the stairs. When they reached the top of the stairs, they stepped to each bedroom door in turn, as if checking in each room, and then there was nothing more. They didn't go into any of the bedrooms. They didn't go back down the stairs. They just stopped. And that was that. There were no signs of a break-in, and no one in my family ever walked up the stairs like that. I don't want to jump to any ghost-related conclusions, but I literally can't think of a rational explanation for the events that happened unless I was hallucinating or something, which is less comforting. That stompy stairs ghost. When I used to see stuff as a kid, I was probably about 5 years old and very sheltered by my parents from like explicit content, so I had no fear of the dark or if anything really. I woke up at night because I really had to pee and I opened my bedroom door to the pitch black, and there on the floor probably 15 feet away from me I saw two diamond-shaped, glowing red eyes very low to floor. I was raised as a Christian, so I immediately thought it was a demon. I closed my door, thought for a sec that maybe I was just imagining things. So I opened the door again and it was still there. I did this for hours cause I really had to pee. I eventually gave up and laid back in bed scared out of my mind, curled up under the covers, and fell asleep. I ended up having one of the scariest nightmares to this day that night, and I'm 21 now. It was the apocalypse and I was scared, so I ran into my room and there was that same demon, I'm assuming, but in the light. Hairless creature with a tail IDKY, but I reached out to touch it and it turned around and bit my neck so fast, and then the whole dream started to spiral, and then I woke up the next morning, ran to the door and opened it and nothing was there, and took the most satisfying piss of my life. IDK if that spooks you all, but definitely going through something like that sticks. Yeah. This one's probably not that great of a story, but it was definitely a scary experience. When I was a teen, my family used to go to this one specific house for winter holidays for a few years. It was in a medieval town in England and the house itself was incredibly old. Most of the house was fine, except for this one room. It was supposed to be my bedroom, but in the middle of the first night I ever stayed there, I picked up my mattress and dragged it over to my sibling's room on the other side of the house. The feeling I got there was horrible. It felt like something in that room really didn't want me there. Something just so full of anger and hate. I don't believe in demons. I still don't, and don't think this was anything demonic. I'm agnostic when it comes to ghosts. However, if demons somehow do exist, that's what was happening in there. I do know the feeling was real. Everyone in the house felt it. My sister used to play a game where she would jump from the hall into the room and back to experience the change in atmosphere. I was convinced it came from the chimney. There was always something wrong with the chimney, because it's a medieval town in England. Obviously there are a lot of ghost stories. My mum has a book full of them. One of them concerns the exact street the house is in and talks about a ghost living in a fireplace. I don't know if it concerns a different house, but it's a pretty spooky coincidence. Restaurant I used to work for was in an old building in Eastern NC, built in the early 1800s and was originally a maritime trading, super old town for America with a lot of ghost stories. Often when closing I would hear the sound of bottle caps being thrown moved around in the second floor dining room. One night was closing up by myself, was walking from the kitchen to the front of the building, which has big glass windows. In the reflection I clearly see a woman wearing a white shirt with blue pants skirt walk down the line in the kitchen behind me and disappear into the pantry area. Was so real I didn't even consider it being a ghost. Went back there to see who it was and no one was there. There was no exit out of the pantry prep area. Immediately just left for the night. Left the rest of the lights on. Left closing paperwork for the next day. Locked the door and drove straight home. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to Reddit Universe.